Welcome back to another English listening practice video. Today's story will help you learn new vocabulary and improve your comprehension naturally. Listen carefully and prepare to change your mindset with the story of Sir Isaac Newton. Have you ever sat quietly under the open sky and wondered how the universe holds together? Have you ever questioned why an object always falls straight to the earth instead of floating away? Hundreds of years ago, a lonely child asked these exact questions during a time of great darkness. His name was Isaac Newton, and his thoughts would change the course of human history forever. Our historical journey begins in the cold, silent winter of 1642 in a small English village. The world outside was filled with immense political trouble, sickness, and deep social uncertainty. Inside a modest stone farmhouse called Woolsthorpe, a tiny baby was born on Christmas Day. He was so incredibly small and fragile that no one in the room expected him to survive his first night. Newton's life started with profound hardship long before he could even utter his very first word. His father, a wild and uneducated farmer, had passed away just 3 months before his birth. He was left in the care of a heartbroken, isolated mother in a deeply challenging rural world. Yet, against all the impossible medical odds of the time, this weak little baby fought and lived. When young Isaac was only 3 years old, his fragile world shifted dramatically once again. His mother remarried a wealthy older clergyman from a neighboring village and moved away immediately. She left young Isaac behind, trusting his care entirely to his elderly grandmother in the old house. Without any friends, siblings, or parents around him, Isaac grew up as a deeply solitary child. Instead of playing high-energy games with the other village children, Isaac preferred to watch. He spent endless hours observing the way water curved around rough stones in the local rivers. He carefully tracked the slow, silent movement of shadows across the grass as the bright sun moved. This deep loneliness did not break his youthful spirit. Instead, it opened his mind to nature. To pass the long, quiet hours of his isolation, he began creating complex things with his own hands. He built highly detailed wooden clocks, small working watermills, and incredibly accurate sundials. He even crafted delicate paper lanterns and carefully attached them to the long tails of kites at night. The simple local villagers saw these glowing lights in the dark sky and wondered if they were omets. Even as a young schoolboy, Isaac possessed a rare, intense level of psychological focus. He did not look at a mechanical object just to admire its outer visual beauty or its clever design. He desperately wanted to take it apart, analyze its inner pieces, and find a way to make it better. This quiet, unstoppable curiosity was the very first spark of a brilliant, world-changing mind. As Isaac grew older, the time came for him to receive a formal education away from his village. He was sent to a grammar school in a nearby town called Grantham, living with a local family. In the classroom, young Isaac did not immediately shine as a star student or a brilliant prodigy. He was often quiet, distracted by his own thoughts, and stood near the bottom of his class. The turning point in his school life came from an unexpected moment of physical conflict. A classic schoolyard bully, who happened to be the top student in the class, kicked Isaac in the stomach. This painful event woke up a fierce, competitive spirit inside the quiet, solitary boy. Isaac realized he could not defeat the bully with physical strength, so he chose a different battle. He decided to defeat the bully using the absolute power of his mind and his intellect. He focused all his energy on his studies, reading every book he could find on every subject. He quickly rose past his classmates, eventually becoming the top-ranked student in the entire school. This early experience taught him that focus and determination could overcome any difficult obstacle. However, just as his mind was expanding, his mother returned to Woolsthorpe with a new plan. Her second husband had passed away, and she wanted Isaac to manage the family farm. She pulled him out of school, expecting him to care for the sheep and guard the fields. But Isaac was a terrible farmer. His mind was entirely captured by the world of ideas. While the sheep wandered away into the neighbors' fields, Isaac sat quietly under a tree. He constructed water wheels in the streams or read complex mathematics books in secret. He completely forgot to eat, clean the barns, or go to the crowded local markets to sell goods. His uncle saw this behavior and realized that forcing Isaac to farm was wasting a rare gift. With the help of an encouraging schoolmaster, his mother was finally persuaded to let him go. At the age of 18, Isaac packed his few belongings and left the countryside behind. He arrived at the famous Trinity College at Cambridge University in the summer of 1661. A grand new world of philosophy, science, and higher mathematics was waiting for him. At Cambridge, Isaac had to work as a servant for wealthier students to pay for his education. He washed their clothes, carried their heavy meals, and cleaned their rooms every single day. Despite the humbling work, he gained access to the greatest library he had ever seen. He spent his nights reading the revolutionary ideas of modern thinkers like René Descartes. While studying at Cambridge, Isaac did not simply accept the old theories written in ancient textbooks. He created a private notebook for himself and wrote a powerful phrase across the top of the page. He wrote, "Amicus Plato, amicus Aristoteles, sed magis amica veritas." This Latin phrase meant, "Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my greatest friend is truth." He was questioning the very foundation of how humans understood the physical world around them. He began studying the nature of light, mathematics, and the strange movements of the planets. But just as he was preparing to graduate, a massive catastrophe struck the nation of England. The year was 1665, and a deadly disease known as the Great Plague began to spread rapidly. The university in Cambridge closed its doors immediately to protect the students from the sickness. Everyone was told to leave the crowded cities and seek safety in the isolated countryside. Isaac packed his academic books once again and returned to his mother's quiet farmhouse in Woolsthorpe. This dark period of global panic and isolation would become the most important chapter of his life. For 18 months, young Isaac was completely cut off from the academic community and teachers. He sat alone in the quiet orchard, surrounded only by nature and his own deep thoughts. History now refers to this remarkable period of his life as his annus mirabilis. Those Latin words translate to English as the Year of Wonders. It was during this long isolation that the famous event with the apple supposedly took place. As the story goes, Isaac was sitting quietly under an apple tree in the family orchard. He watched a single ripe apple break away from its branch and fall directly to the ground. To an ordinary person, this was a completely basic, uninteresting daily occurrence. But to Newton's highly analytical mind, it was a profound mystery that required an explanation. He asked himself, why did the apple travel straight down toward the center of the earth? Why did it not float sideways or travel upward into the vast blue sky instead? He realized there must be an invisible drawing force pulling the apple toward the ground. Then his mind took a massive, brilliant leap that no human had ever taken before. He wondered if that same invisible force reached all the way out into the dark universe. Could this power be the exact same force that holds the moon in its orbit around the Earth? This simple, brilliant thought was the birth of the universal law of gravitation. During that same period of isolation, Newton did not limit his mind to gravity alone. He turned his deep attention to the mysterious nature of light and color. People at the time believed that white light from the sun was completely pure. They thought that colors were created only when light passed through dirty glass or shadows. Isaac wanted to test this theory himself, using a very simple experiment in his dark room. He made the room completely dark, allowing only a tiny ray of sunlight to enter through a hole. He placed a triangular piece of glass, called a prism, directly into the path of the light ray. What happened next on the wall looked like absolute magic to the human eye. The single beam of white light passed through the glass and split into a beautiful rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet spread across the dark wall. But Newton did not stop at just looking at this beautiful display of colors. He wondered if the prism was creating the colors or if the colors were already inside the light. To find the answer, he placed a second prism upside down behind the colorful rainbow. When the separated colors passed through the second glass, they gathered back together. The colorful rainbow turned back into a single beam of pure white light once again. Isaac had discovered that white light is actually a mixture of all the colors in the universe. This groundbreaking discovery completely shattered the scientific beliefs of the old world. At the same time, he realized that standard glass lenses distorted colors in telescopes. To solve this practical problem, he designed a completely new kind of telescope using mirrors. Instead of relying on heavy glass lenses, his invention used a curved metal mirror to reflect light. This tiny, powerful device could see much deeper into the night sky than older models. It was a brilliant engineering success that would soon make him famous across England. But light and gravity were still not enough to satisfy his growing mathematical mind. He noticed that existing mathematics could not measure changing curves or moving objects accurately. So, instead of giving up, the 24-year-old youth invented a whole new branch of math. Today, students around the world know this advanced system of mathematics as calculus. He had created a language that could calculate the exact speed of falling objects and moving planets. All of these massive discoveries were made before he even reached his 25th birthday. When the Great Plague finally ended, Isaac returned to Cambridge with a new identity. He was no longer just a quiet, unknown student working as a servant in the college. He returned as a man carrying the secret keys to understanding the entire universe. However, he was not a man who loved the spotlight or enjoyed public praise. He kept his brilliant discoveries hidden in private notebooks, afraid of public debate. He preferred the silence of his room and the company of his books over fame. But his work on the reflecting telescope could not stay hidden forever in the dark. The Royal Society, the most prestigious group of scientists in London, heard of his invention. They requested to see his telescope, and when they tested it, they were shocked. It was much smaller than the huge, clumsy telescopes they used, yet it was more powerful. They immediately elected him as a member of their society in early 1672. Suddenly, the quiet boy from Woolsthorpe was at the very center of the scientific world. But this new fame brought unexpected and painful challenges into his peaceful life. Many older, established scientists began to argue with his theories about light. They attacked his work, wrote harsh letters, and questioned his scientific accuracy. Isaac, who was a deeply sensitive and private man, found these public debates exhausting. He felt that people were more interested in fighting than in discovering the truth. Because of this, he decided to retreat again, pulling away from the public eye. He stopped publishing his findings and focused strictly on his own private research. He spent his days studying alchemy, chemistry, and ancient historical texts in secret. For many years, he lived a lonely life at Cambridge, buried in deep study. He seemed to have forgotten the world of gravity and light that he had once mastered. He lived in a world of his own, speaking to almost no one for long periods of time. He became known as a man of extreme focus, often skipping meals to keep working. During these years, he lived almost like a hermit within the stone walls of the college. His only true companions were his handwritten notes and his endless, complex calculations. The outside world began to think that the genius of Isaac Newton had simply faded away. Little did they know, he was preparing to write the most important book in human history. The silence surrounding Isaac's life was finally broken in the summer of 1684. A brilliant young astronomer named Edmund Halley decided to visit Cambridge. Halley was trying to solve a massive scientific riddle that was puzzling scientists in London. He wanted to know what shape a planet's orbit would take under the influence of gravity. Halley walked into Newton's quiet office and asked him this very question. Without hesitating for even a second, Newton gave a direct and confident answer. He said the orbit of the planet would be a perfect, smooth overland ellipse. Halley was completely amazed by how quickly and easily Newton had answered the riddle. He asked Newton how he could possibly know this complex mathematical truth so surely. Newton calmly replied that he had calculated it many years ago during his isolation. Halley asked to see the calculations, but Newton had misplaced the old papers in his messy room. He promised his visitor that he would rewrite the entire proof and send it to him. This unexpected meeting acted as a massive spark for Newton's quiet, sleeping mind. He did not just rewrite the mathematical proof. He became completely obsessed with the topic. For 18 intense months, he locked himself in his study, barely sleeping or eating. He was combining all his theories of gravity, motion, and mathematics into a single system. His loyal servant recorded that Newton spent his nights writing under the dim light of candles. He would often stand in his room, lost in deep thought, staring at a blank wall for hours. He completely forgot to eat his meals, which were left untouched outside his heavy wooden door. He was pouring his entire soul into writing his absolute masterpiece, the Principia. When the book was finally published in 1687, it shocked the entire civilized world. Written in formal Latin, the book introduced his famous 3 laws of motion. These laws explained how everything in the universe moves from a tiny stone to a massive planet. He proved that the very same gravity pulling an apple down holds the moon in its orbit. With a single book, Newton had united the earth and the heavy heavens under one set of laws. The Principia is still considered by many to be the greatest scientific book ever written. It transformed Isaac Newton from a quiet, eccentric professor into a global intellectual giant. The lonely child from the countryside had finally mapped the invisible laws of the universe. Following the massive success of his book, Newton's life changed in ways he never expected. He was no longer just a quiet researcher hiding in the shadows of Cambridge University. He was now a public figure, a famous intellectual whom leaders and kings wanted to meet. But this intense work on the Principia had taken a heavy toll on his physical and mental health. By the early 1690s, the extreme exhaustion and lack of sleep caught up with him. Newton suffered a severe emotional and nervous breakdown that lasted for nearly 2 years. He became deeply paranoid, writing strange letters to his close friends accusing them of plots. He believed people were trying to steal his work or ruin his reputation in the scientific world. During this dark period, he completely stopped his scientific research and avoided visitors. But just as he had survived a fragile childhood, his resilient mind slowly began to heal. As he recovered, he realized he wanted a complete change of environment and a new purpose. He decided to leave the quiet academic halls of Cambridge after 30 long years. In 1696, Newton packed his vast library and moved to the busy, crowded city of London. He accepted a prestigious government position as the warden of the Royal Mint. The Mint was the official institution responsible for making all of England's metal coins. Most people expected Newton to treat this job as a simple, peaceful retirement post. But Newton did not know how to do any job without putting his entire heart into it. He arrived in London to find the nation's financial system in a state of absolute crises. Criminals were constantly making cheap, fake coins, which was destroying the country's economy. Furthermore, people were clipping the precious silver edges off official coins to sell them. Newton took this challenge as a personal battle, just like he had with his childhood bully. He acted like a modern detective, visiting dark taverns and dangerous prisons in disguise. He gathered secret information, interviewed witnesses, and built cases against the counterfeiters. He even established a highly organized system to recall every single old coin in the country. He replaced them with brand new, high-quality coins that had specially retted, patterned edges. This brilliant design made it impossible for criminals to shave off the silver without being caught. Through his tireless work, Newton successfully saved the British economy from total collapse. He proved that a great scientific mind could solve the most practical problems of the real world. Newton's incredible work at the Royal Mint did not go unnoticed by the royal family. In the year 1705, Queen Anne traveled to Trinity College in Cambridge for a special ceremony. There, under the grand arches of the university, she placed a sword on his shoulder. She officially knighted him, transforming the farmer's son into Sir Isaac Newton. He was the very first scientist in British history to receive this prestigious honor. This moment was a powerful symbol of how much the world now valued scientific thoughts. But even with a royal title, Newton's competitive and fierce nature did not soften. He was elected as the president of the Royal Society, a position he held for the rest of his life. As president, he ruled the scientific community of England with an iron, uncompromising hand. This period of his life was marked by one of the most famous conflicts in academic history. A brilliant German philosopher named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz had also discovered calculus. Leibniz had published his own mathematical system, which was very similar to Newton's. A bitter global war of words erupted between the two great thinkers and their supporters. Newton claimed that Leibniz had secretly stolen the idea from his private papers. Leibniz argued that he had come up with the revolutionary mathematical system completely on his own. This intense rivalry lasted for many years, bringing out a dark, vengeful side of Newton's character. He used all his immense power and influence at the Royal Society to discredit his rival. He even wrote official reports accusing Leibniz of plagiarism, pretending they were written by others. History eventually showed that both men had actually developed calculus completely independently, but this conflict showed that even the greatest minds are not immune to human jealousy and pride. Despite these bitter battles, Newton's scientific reputation only continued to grow worldwide. He published a second major book called Optics, which detailed his earlier discoveries about light. This book was written in simple English rather than Latin, making it accessible to many more readers. It inspired a whole new generation of young minds to look at the physical world with fresh curiosity. By now, Newton was living a highly comfortable, wealthy life in a large house in London. He was surrounded by books, scientific instruments, and visitors who traveled from far away. They wanted to catch a brief glimpse of the legendary man who had explained the cosmos. The fragile baby who was not expected to survive had become the most powerful intellectual in Europe. As the years rolled by, the great philosopher began to feel the heavy weight of old age. His once tireless body slowly began to tire, and his sharp, active mind became calmer. He spent his final years sitting quietly in his study, surrounded by his massive collection of books. Even in his 80s, he still possessed a quiet, peaceful air of deep curiosity. He lived a comfortable, modest life, refusing to dress in expensive, fancy clothes. He spent much of his wealth helping family members, local schools, and charities in secret. He had no wife or children of his own, having dedicated his entire existence to the truth. His true family was the infinite universe, and his children were his mathematical laws. When people praised his immense achievements, Newton remained remarkably humble. He did not look at himself as a superior being who was better than everyone else. Instead, he looked at his life as a simple, ongoing journey of discovery. He once wrote a beautiful letter to a rival scientist that contained a very famous phrase. He wrote, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." He was acknowledging that his work was only possible because of the thinkers who came before him. He knew that science was a collaborative, endless chain of human effort across generations. This profound humility is what truly made him a master of both science and life. Toward the very end of his journey, he offered another beautiful description of his career. He said he felt like a young boy playing on the edge of a massive, rocky seashore. He had found a few smooth pebbles and a couple of pretty shells on the wet sand, but the great, deep ocean of absolute truth still lay completely undiscovered before him. Even after mapping the stars, he knew that human knowledge was still in its absolute infancy. On a quiet evening in March of 1727, Sir Isaac Newton closed his eyes for the final time. He was 84 years old, a remarkable age for someone born so weak and fragile. His long, inspiring journey on this earth had finally come to a peaceful, quiet end. The nation of England gave him a grand farewell that was usually reserved for kings and queens. His body was carried through the crowded streets of London to Westminster Abbey. Great noblemen, scientists, and political leaders stood side by side to hold his heavy coffin. He was buried in the Grand Abbey, surrounded by the historical monuments of royalty. When the Great Plague finally ended, Isaac returned to Cambridge with a new identity. He was no longer just a quiet, unknown student working as a servant in the college. He returned as a man carrying the secret keys to understanding the entire universe. However, he was not a man who loved the spotlight or enjoyed public praise. He kept his brilliant discoveries hidden in private notebooks, afraid of public debate. He preferred the silence of his room and the company of his books over fame. But his work on the reflecting telescope could not stay hidden forever in the dark. The Royal Society, the most prestigious group of scientists in London, heard of his invention. They requested to see his telescope, and when they tested it, they were shocked. It was much smaller than the huge, clumsy telescopes they used, yet it was more powerful. They immediately elected him as a member of their society in early 1672. Suddenly, the quiet boy from Woolsthorpe was at the very center of the scientific world. But this new fame brought unexpected and painful challenges into his peaceful life. Many older, established scientists began to argue with his theories about light. They attacked his work, wrote harsh letters, and questioned his scientific accuracy. Isaac, who was a deeply sensitive and private man, found these public debates exhausting. He felt that people were more interested in fighting than in discovering the truth. Because of this, he decided to retreat again, pulling away from the public eye. He stopped publishing his findings and focused strictly on his own private research. He spent his days studying alchemy, chemistry, and ancient historical texts in secret. For many years, he lived a lonely life at Cambridge, buried in deep study. He seemed to have forgotten the world of gravity and light that he had once mastered. He lived in a world of his own, speaking to almost no one for long periods of time. He became known as a man of extreme focus, often skipping meals to keep working. During these years, he lived almost like a hermit within the stone walls of the college. His only true companions were his handwritten notes and his endless, complex calculations. The outside world began to think that the genius of Isaac Newton had simply faded away. Little did they know, he was preparing to write the most important book in human history. The physical journey of Isaac Newton ended in that quiet abbey, but his legacy lives on forever. Every time a modern spaceship leaves our planet, it relies directly on his laws of motion. Every time you look at a beautiful rainbow, you are seeing the world through his discovery. He showed humanity that nature is not chaotic. It follows beautiful, predictable laws. A famous poet named Alexander Pope later wrote a brilliant couplet to honor his memory. He wrote, "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, 'Let Newton be,' and all was light." His work did not just change science. It fundamentally changed how humans view their own potential. He proved that a single human mind, armed with focus, could decode the secrets of the universe. Now, as you sit here listening to his incredible story, think about your own journey. You are currently working hard to master a new language, which is a massive challenge. There are days when your goals feel incredibly far away, hidden behind a heavy fog. There are moments when you feel like that lonely boy standing by the edge of the vast ocean. But remember the valuable lessons from the life of this countryside farm boy. Great things are never created through sudden bursts of luck or instant, effortless success. They are built slowly, block by block, through patience, resilience, and steady daily effort. Your daily practice is your own version of Newton's quiet year in the isolated orchard. Do not be afraid of the mistakes you make or the complex rules you fail to remember today. Every mistake is just a rough pebble that you are picking up along the vast seashore of knowledge. If you stay determined, your mind will adjust, grow stronger, and eventually find its focus. You have the immense power within yourself to cross any educational ocean you choose. Thank you so much for walking through this inspiring historical journey with me today. Let the quiet focus of Newton inspire you to sit down with your books with fresh energy. Keep listening, keep practicing, and never stop questioning the beautiful world around you. Your dedication today is building the brilliant future you will inhabit tomorrow. Until our next storytelling session, keep moving forward, stay deeply curious, and take care. The world is waiting to hear your unique voice, so keep practicing with a brave heart.